From deep diving into the darkest days of American history, to being the first film by Martin Scorsese at the Cannes Festival since 1985, this is all about Killers of the Flower Moon, the amazing true story. In his latest feature, Scorsese goes way back. The director extraordinaire is no stranger to tackling history. Remember Silence and Gangs of New York? Well, the man's back with more of the good stuff. Only this time, there's talk about Killers of the Flower Moon being his magnum opus. Martin has fashioned a film that tells a story about some of the most horrific corners of human history that many do not know. It's based on Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI, written by David Grann. The book is about how dozens of indigenous people were brutally murdered in Osage County, Oklahoma in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. But that's not all it's about. It also gets into the complex themes of greed, racism, and the initial days of the FBI. The Burkhart couple, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, is central to both the book and the movie. To get to the heart of the matter, though, you first gotta know a little bit about the Osage Nation. Now, the Osage Nation has been around for about 1,000 years. They were a part of the Northern Plain tribes and called themselves People of the Middle Waters. Around 1825, the Osage lost huge chunks of their land due to treaties with the U.S. government and had to follow the Trail of Tears to find a place in southeast Kansas. The nation renegotiated their treaty in 1865 and bought themselves land in Oklahoma. But not many survived the move to the place. Only about 3,000 Osage people made it to the new land, which is presently known as Osage County, Oklahoma. For all their hard luck, something incredible happened. They soon discovered that their tribal lands were rich in oil. You know what that means, right? Money. To their credit, the Osage played it smart. They figured out that they had oil before American companies did. Plus, they knew that their lands were considered undesirable by white men, so they acquired vast lands that'd isolate them. They knew that when the existence of black gold would be discovered by others, they'd hit the jackpot. But, as fate would have it, their newfound luck exposed the Osage Nation to a whole new set of troubles. White Americans had a totally different view of what had happened. Even though Indian Americans had planned for all of it, it was generally believed that they'd just gotten lucky. And so, some Oklahomans decided that the wealth needed to be redistributed. How? Well, the tribal people had become immensely wealthy, but there was a little problem. If the Osage individual died, their wealth could be inherited by a non-Osage. This made the indigenous people a huge target for violence. The white businessmen planned to take full advantage of this possibility, and their goal was to get their hands on Osage riches. This whole story forms the premise of Killers of the Flower Moon. Robert De Niro plays William Hale. He was one of the people who was green with envy, looking at all the Osage money. Well-connected and rough, Hale was a player. He cozied up to his victims by presenting himself as an ally to their cause, but at the same time, he was a guy who was owed favors by many of the local politicians. William hatched a plan, simple and cruel. His nephew, Ernest Burkhart, portrayed by DiCaprio, returned from the war, looking to start a family and get a life going. Hale was there to support him. The two men aimed to marry into the Osage Nation so they could inherit the wealth should the opportunity arise, in case some member of their new family bites the dust. Now the wealth of the Osage worked with a headright system. Basically, all of the oil in the region was owned by the tribe collectively, but existed in a trust maintained by the federal government. They could drill for oil, and the tribe was paid royalties. Each member had one headright, but they were passed down. Molly had collected a number of them from her relatives, which made her a very valuable asset to Ernest and William. Also, as a result of the evil planning of the two men, bodies quickly started appearing. At the time, though, police departments weren't equipped to handle murder investigations, and so inexperienced locals had to pitch in. But there was another way too. If you had the cash, you didn't have to wait around for an investigation. You could seek out private detectives. The Osage sought the ruthless Pinkertons to look into the matter. These were dedicated professionals, but they didn't exactly do things by the book. As the hired investigators dug deeper, they soon stumbled upon the violent conspiracy behind the brutal slayings. Turns out, it went all the way to the top. Because when an Osage representative went out to Washington to ask the federal government to look into it, he was also murdered. This was a warning to everybody. Don't look where you're not supposed to. Meanwhile, things kept getting worse for the people. In one incident, a bomb was planted in an Osage home that left 3 dead and terrorized the rest of the town too. The governor of Oklahoma took matters seriously and sent one of his best men to look into what was going on. But that best man turned out to be every bit as corrupt as the other local criminals in town and didn't help in solving the mystery at all. Soon after, the FBI stepped in. The FBI was fairly new at the time, and Agent Tom White, played in the film by the talented Jesse Plemons, came to Oklahoma with only one goal in mind, and that was to do something about the outrageous state of affairs. Just a few months in, White and his team caught a break. They realized that many of the guardians, or the people who were in charge of supervising the Osage wealth, were corrupt. They'd been cheating the people out of their own money and had stolen about $8 million from them. But it didn't stop at these guardians. Lawyers, judges, businessmen, and doctors were getting a slice of the pie too. It was discovered that Hale had way too much to gain from the murders and had gotten about $25,000 from one of the murdered men. Not just that, but he even forged a creditor's note to pocket $6,000 from another Osage man who'd passed away. White also narrowed in on how the collective deaths of the victims all pointed to one person, and that was Molly Burkhart. What's interesting, though, is that the murders weren't random at all. She'd inherited the land rights of many of the victims, and so she was their ultimate victim. White realized that Molly's life was in danger. She had diabetes and was being treated by doctors under Hale's control. They were corrupt and had worsened her condition, and as soon as she was taken away from the hospital, she got better. With the truth out in the open, Hale had a lot to answer for. After the FBI collected sufficient evidence, a trial for the man soon followed, but it turned out to be quite the sensation with multiple twists and turns. Burkhart admitted his uncle had been the brains behind the Osage murders, and also added that he'd hired a man to kill one of the victims, according to Hale's instructions. But when it came time to own up to things in court, Ernest backtracked after having a meeting with Hale's lawyers. William, on the other hand, said that the FBI had forced the witnesses to go against him. The original trial was ruled a mistrial, and the drama began all over again with another trial in place. This time, Hale got what was coming to him, and that was life imprisonment. Eventually, Molly also divorced Burkhart, and the whole thing was rightfully termed as the Reign of Terror. Killers of the Flower Moon is a powerful story of injustice, and Martin has done a great job without sugarcoating anything. Don't just take my word for it. Principal Chief of the Osage Nation, Jeffrey Standing Bear, has also approved the film. He said that many people suffered through the real events of the movie, and those effects are still fresh. He also added that Scorsese had restored the trust of the Osage people and was confident that it wouldn't be betrayed. What's funny is, initially, Martin set out to make a totally different film. It was supposed to focus more on the early years of the FBI, but the story of the Osage people was so powerful that it became the highlight.